In the last month of my life, I accidentally broke the ornament of the fake daughter of the family. As a result, I was kicked out by my parents and elder brother. On the night I was preparing to face death, I suddenly received a letter from the underworld. The person in the letter said that he had a piggy bank left in the human world. He asked me to help find it and then burn it for him. The handwriting was familiar and scrawled. It was from the school bully who had chased me for 5 years and then died at the age of 19. I let out a bitter laugh in the silent and cold room. After a moment, I tried to write a sentence on the paper. If I help burn it for you, can you share some of the money in it with me? I'll come down soon to spend it. Suddenly, the paper stopped in mid-air. After a long while, new hasty handwriting emerged. What's wrong with you? On the day I packed my things and prepared to be admitted to the hospital, I put a few scattered clothes into the suitcase. When I stood up, probably due to hypoglycemia, my vision suddenly went dark, and I almost fell down. In a flurry, I tried to hold on to the tea table, but I accidentally swept a very small Buddha statue ornament on the tea table onto the ground. The Buddha statue landed on the carpet with a very soft sound. In fact, the carpet was thick, and it wasn't damaged, however. The 4 people sitting around in the dining room not far away immediately turned their eyes towards me in unison. Subconsciously, I reached out my hand and picked up the ornament from the ground. Almost at the same time, Jenny let out a sharp scream. Don't touch it. I was stunned for a moment and quickly put the Buddha statue back on the tea table. She still had a furious expression and rushed towards me. Who allowed you to touch my things? It's for keeping us safe. You've dirted it. Dirted it, I subconsciously explained. The carpet is clean. It's not dirty, and it's not damaged either. Jenny was out of control, her body trembling, and she raised her hand to hit me. Her voice was filled with resentment. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not about the carpet. You're a dirty woman who deals with the dead every day. You did it on purpose. That hand was about to land on my face. I instinctively raised my hand to block it. Then, my body was pushed hard. My elder brother, Lucas, came over with a dark face, pushed me aside, and then pulled Jenny behind him. He looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment. Lucy, that's enough. I was stunned for a long time, and out of extreme anger, I laughed instead. What should I stop? What have I done? In Lucas's cold eyes, there was a look of understanding everything. He stopped talking, as if he disdained to argue with me. Not far away, my mother let out a sigh. Lucy, you also know your job. Things like Buddha statues, after all, are the most particular about being clean and decent. I looked at them, at this so-called home. Suddenly, I felt that everything I saw was unfamiliar. After a long time, I sneered and said, since you think I'm so dirty, why do you still let me live here? As soon as I finished speaking, my father angrily roared, then get out. When I dragged my suitcase and left home, behind me was my father's furious voice. She's been making things difficult for Jenny all these years. She's getting worse and worse. We should have kicked her out long ago to teach her a lesson. Lucas looked at me indifferently and didn't say a word. My mother was coaxing Jenny and sighed again. When I left the community and planned to go to the hospital to complete the admission procedures, the attending doctor suddenly sent me the diagnosis results. He added a few euphemistic and cautious words. You don't need to rush to be admitted to the hospital. If there's anything you want to do, you can go ahead and do it first. It was in a very gentle and tolerant tone. It seemed that the person who had a serious face yesterday and sternly told me to complete the admission procedures immediately wasn't him. In the midsummer of N City, there was the endless chirping of cicadas in the front yard, under the scorching sun. For no reason, I shivered. No one can truly remain calm when suddenly facing death. I stared at that text message for a long time, and then in a hurry, I turned off my phone. Instinctively, I turned around and looked at the home behind me. Lucas was standing on the steps outside the door. He met my gaze, furrowed his brows, and seemed to want to say something but held back. For a moment, I even thought he was going to show some concern for me. When I went to the hospital yesterday, the doctor said my face looked really bad. People in the business world say that Lucas has eyes like an eagle, and nothing can escape his notice. I thought that if he asked, I might tell him the truth. After a while, he finally opened his mouth. If you know you have nowhere to go after leaving home, go and apologize to Jenny right away. The last bit of something unknown hanging in my heart fell silently and shattered into pieces. I suddenly remembered that when I was 17 years old, Lucas picked me up and took me home. At that time, he said, "Brother will take you away. From now on, with brother, mom, and dad, You will never be wronged again. I looked at him, and then at my parents behind him, and suddenly let out a bitter laugh. I clenched the handle of the suitcase in my palm. I turned around and left without any hesitation. There was no need to go to the hospital anymore. Fortunately, after working for many years, although my job was not decent, I had at least saved some money and used the down payment to buy a very small one-bedroom apartment in a remote location. No matter how shabby it was, at least no one would tell me to get out there. I moved to the new place, then went to the funeral parlor, explained my illness, and submitted my resignation. On the way back to my residence, a sudden heavy rain in the midsummer evening drenched me from head to toe. It seemed that the water heater in the house was broken. I adjusted it for a long time and finally fixed it, but I was completely exhausted. I simply sat down with my back against the wall, let my mind go blank, and tried to catch my breath. Something dripped down and landed on the ground. The scarlet color mixed with the water on the bathroom floor was rather dazzling. I raised my hand and touched my nose, only to feel it sticky with blood. With great effort, I picked up my phone and scrolled through the contact list from the beginning to the end, only to find that there wasn't even a single person I could ask for help. Actually, I could have called the emergency number, but I put down the phone. I looked at the air and didn't move anymore. Because of my profession, I had seen countless dead people and countless people on the verge of death. I knew best how those with terminal illnesses suffered a fate worse than death before they died. If death was destined to come soon, I would rather not have those last few days. The surroundings seemed to be swaying vaguely, and I wanted to close my eyes and take a nap. However, in midair, suddenly, a few words vaguely appeared. Excuse me. I was stunned for a while and was certain that I was having a hallucination. It's not surprising for someone who is about to die to be in a state of confusion, but the handwriting was really familiar, scrawled, ugly, and without any order. I found it somewhat amusing, and my dazed mind seemed to be pulled back many years ago. That young man who died at the age of 19, during his lifetime, he was just like me, not liked by anyone. It seemed that he sensed my gaze. On the piece of paper floating in midair, new handwriting quickly emerged. I have a piggy bank left in the human world. Would you be so kind as to take some time to help me get it and then burn it for me? This time, my consciousness became a little clearer, and the words I saw were no longer so blurry. It didn't seem to be a hallucination. And I felt incredibly surprised for a moment, but perhaps because I had seen so many dead people, or perhaps because I was also about to die. No matter how shocked I was, I didn't seem to feel afraid. I even felt that I had regained a little strength and wiped the blood that smeared half of my face. With great effort, I stood up and rummaged through the drawer to find a pen. When I returned to the bathroom, the piece of paper was still floating in midair waiting for me. I sat back down, wanting to respond to this strange event before my death. I wanted to tell him that I was afraid it wasn't convenient for me. I was also about to die and didn't have any time left. It seemed that he sensed something, and soon new scrawled words appeared on the paper. It's very easy to get. It will take at most 1 day. Please do me this favor. Probably, he really needed the money urgently. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In my mind, across the long river of time for many years, that face vaguely emerged again, arrogant, stubborn, and repulsive, until finally, it turned into a body with a blurred face and incomplete limbs. I picked up the pen several times. In the end, I put away the words of refusal and wrote down a sentence. If I help burn it for you, can you share some of the money in it with me? Maybe it had been a long time since anyone had talked to me. I actually seemed to be trying to joke with a dead person, most likely. It was just the spirit of a dead person that I had imagined. The words I wrote faintly appeared on the paper. After thinking about it, I added an explanation. I'll be able to go to the underworld soon, and then I can spend the money. There was a crack in the corner of the bathroom window, and the summer night wind silently blew in. The piece of paper, which was gently swaying, suddenly froze in midair. I continued to sit there and quietly looked at the motionless piece of paper for a long time. Neither of us moved. I even thought that my hallucination was probably about to end. Then, very slowly and hesitantly, new handwriting emerged on it. What's wrong? The piece of paper swayed gently in front of my eyes. I didn't reply and was a bit lost in thought. New handwriting kept emerging, chaotically, and then disappearing again and again. In the end, finally, 2 words were left. Okay. I asked for the address of the piggy bank, then I stood up, took some painkillers, and went to sleep. The address wasn't far away, just at a university in the neighboring province. 1 day was indeed enough, and I wasn't in such a hurry to die. Just consider it doing a good deed before I die. Early the next morning, I bought a plane ticket to Y City. Unfortunately, in the airport waiting lounge, I ran into Jenny again. She was surrounded by my parents on either side, and Lucas was pushing her suitcase, walking a step ahead of her. As always, she was the little princess being adored by everyone. She was complaining, "I'm so tired," as if she didn't see me, and walked straight towards the direction where I was sitting. I didn't want to be seen by them, so I stood up and wanted to find another place to sit. Behind me, Jenny suddenly raised her voice. She called me in a seemingly surprised tone, "Sister, why are you here too?" In the blink of an eye, they were in front of me. Jenny looked at the plane ticket in my hand and showed an incredulous expression. "You're also going to Y City? Don't tell me, you're also going to Y City University." My parents' expressions immediately became strange. Lucas furrowed his brows and stared at me with a disappointed and knowing look. He said coldly, "Return the ticket." I didn't have the energy to deal with them and turned around to leave. My arm was suddenly grabbed, and in my ear was Lucas's angry voice. "Lucy, I told you last night that if you still want to go home, you should apologize to Jenny." Instead of sneaking around and following Jenny and us now, blood rushed to my head in an instant, and I turned around and forcefully shook off his hand. "Who's following you? The airport isn't owned by the Lincoln family. It's my freedom to go wherever I want." Lucas seemed to be really angry and didn't say anything for a while. After a long time, he sneered, "I don't care if you're following Jenny or going to Y City University to participate in some anatomy class. You'd better give up that idea as soon as possible and stop having those unlucky thoughts. Look at yourself. After dealing with the dead for so many years, you're so gloomy and terrifying all over. Where do you still look like a living person?" Mom and Jenny are afraid of those things. How many times have they been scared by you over the years? I couldn't bear it anymore. I was so angry that my vision went dark, and I interrupted him angrily. "It's none of your business to discipline me. Just pretend I never came back. Just pretend I've been dead for a long time." My father came over with an angry face and raised his hand to slap me. I quickly raised my hand and blocked his arm. Over the years, as an embalmer and occasionally helping with carrying the remains, I had developed some strength in my hands. I blocked his arm and didn't let go until after a while. He was so angry that his face turned pale and red, and he angrily scolded me, "You're simply hopeless." I shook off his hand, turned around, and left, choosing an empty seat far enough away from them. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother covering her face with both hands and sobbing sadly. What else do we have to do for her to be closer to us? Countless gazes around me, filled with doubt and accusation, were cast towards me. When I sat down again, from a distance, I saw my father take a wet tissue and carefully wipe his sleeve. It took me a moment to remember that when I blocked his hand, I had grabbed his sleeve. After he finished wiping, he probably felt a bit guilty and looked up in my direction. Across the crowd, our eyes happened to meet. He was stunned for a moment, then he quickly threw away the tissue and averted his gaze. I found it funny. I twitched the corners of my mouth, but I couldn't manage a smile. In fact, if someone really cared, I could be a bit more gentle and obedient. In fact, when I first returned to the Lincoln family, I also tried to be a bit more obedient, probably because of the great emotional fluctuations. There was a warm feeling in my nose again. I got up in a hurry and went into the restroom. Several pieces of tissue were soaked before the blood gradually stopped. When I left the restroom, the boarding gate had already opened. Lucas, along with Jenny and my parents, had already gone in. After getting on the plane, I didn't see them anymore. After landing in Y City, I didn't delay and went straight to Y City University. The university had strict access control, but I had come here to teach classes before and knew several familiar teachers. The security guards also knew me and would let me in. When I reached the school gate, I saw Jenny and Lucas again. They were standing in the security booth. Jenny was holding an ice cream and talking to Lucas. When she saw me, she immediately ran out and called me. "I made a bet with brother that you would definitely come after us, and I was right." I directly registered my name at the security booth without raising my head and just said, "Oh, do I need to congratulate you on winning the bet?" Jenny took another bite of the ice cream. After watching me finish registering my name, she said regretfully, "Sister, you want to enter the school, you're not a teacher or a student, so you can't enter." Before I could say, "It's none of your business," meeting the strange gaze of the security guard, I suddenly had a bad premonition. Sure enough, the next moment, Lucas spoke unhurriedly. allowing outsiders to enter the school is irresponsible for the safety of teachers and students. I've mentioned it to Uncle Frank. There shouldn't be any exceptions for this kind of thing. The Uncle Frank he mentioned was the president of Y City University. The security guard looked at me with an awkward expression. Obviously, there was nothing he could do, Jenny said guiltily. It's all my fault. I told my brother that I was a bit afraid of seeing you, and he just, sister, why don't you change your job? My hand hanging by my side clenched tightly, and I smiled at her and said, why don't you get a new pair of eyes? The smile froze on her face quickly turned a bit paler. And she retreated behind Lucas. 7 years ago, when I first returned to the Lincoln family, she framed me. I didn't explain much. I just threw a fruit knife at her and almost blinded one of her eyes. Probably, she couldn't forget that either. Finally, she stopped talking. She hugged Lucas's arm and trembled, staring at me warily. Lucas also protected her tightly, with a defensive expression. Over the years, since I injured Jenny's eye 7 years ago, Lucas, my parents, and I have been the same. Whenever there was the slightest conflict between me and Jenny, they would immediately protect her tightly. It was as if I was some extremely terrifying ferocious beast that specifically preyed on Jenny. I looked at them calmly, until Jenny, a bit scared but still arrogant, gave me a fierce glare, and then turned around and ran into the school. I couldn't enter the school anymore, and there was no need for me to stay any longer. When I turned around and left, Lucas chased after me. He blocked my way and stared at me with cold eyes. Lucy, what on earth do you still want? Shouldn't I be the one asking them this question, as their precious Jenny wished? I moved out of the Lincoln family and no longer made her afraid. I lived in my own house, did my own things, and waited for my own death. But what on earth do they still want? I looked at Lucas in silence for a long time. I don't know why. Maybe I was a bit muddled under the scorching sun. I suddenly said something without any context. At that time, she was the one who first tore up an important document of Dad's. She threw it in my bedroom and tried to frame me for it. That's why I got angry and injured her. Lucas frowned tightly. Do you think I would believe such words? I was a bit tired. Since I returned to the Lincoln family 7 years ago, I had been arguing with Jenny for 7 years. I had been arguing with my parents for 7 years and with Lucas for 7 years. But today, I didn't want to argue anymore, so I just interrupted him softly. I'm just saying it. I don't expect you to believe it. Lucas was stunned for a moment. Over the years, it had been a long time since I had talked to him so calmly. I went to the street and hailed a taxi. He chased after me again. Lucy, what do you want to do in the school? I knew he didn't care about me. He just wanted to confirm again and again whether I would still hurt Jenny. I ignored him and opened the door of the back seat of the taxi. Behind me, Lucas's voice was still displeased, but it seemed to have a bit more urgency. Your face is as white as a ghost. Have you had a checkup? Hanging around in that kind of place every day, don't let yourself get contaminated by something dirty. I was always like this, not worthy of hearing a few nice words from him. I closed the car door, completely cutting off the sound from outside the car window, in the middle of the night. When I was lying on the bed in a trance, that piece of paper floated in front of my eyes again. This time, it was clean, with no words on it at all. I stared at it for a long time, and it didn't disappear. I wasn't very conscious. For a moment, I even thought that it just saw that I was lonely and wanted to accompany me here. But soon, I remembered, I had promised the owner of the paper to help him get the piggy bank. I broke my promise, although I felt guilty. I still told him the whole story truthfully. I apologized to him and said that I probably couldn't help him anymore, regarding entering the school. Maybe if I thought of a way, I could enter it one day, but I didn't have many more days. If it wasn't for that entrustment from the deceased, maybe I would have already passed away last night. It seemed that my nosebleeds started to flow again, my head was dizzy, and I didn't have the strength to pick up a pen. I spoke intermittently, fortunately. It seemed that the person heard me. It took a while for the paper to slowly show some handwriting. It was just a few short words. It doesn't matter. So, was this matter finally over? I closed my eyes with a sense of relief, and my consciousness sank deeper and deeper. On this sweltering summer night, I only felt cold. I reached out and groped around randomly, but I couldn't find the quilt. That piece of paper seemed to still be there. It fell down, fluttering, and stuck to my face. The rough and cool feeling of the paper didn't come. In a trance, I felt a warm and soft touch. What stuck to me was like a very light hug, like a broad palm. I turned over in a daze and hugged the paper. It seemed that I had crashed into a warm chest. I opened my eyes in a half-conscious state and saw that face. Unable to distinguish between reality and a dream, he was lying beside me, holding me, looking down at me with his eyes. He still looked like a 19-year-old boy, that arrogant, stubborn, and repulsive boy who died at the age of 19, with a disfigured face and an incomplete body. I thought that I might have already died, so I saw that person who had already passed away. I met Simon when I was 13 years old. At that time, I was in the second grade of junior high school. Because I was a premature baby, I was short in stature, had a naturally low IQ, and had difficulty concentrating. I was frequently bullied by the girls in my class and the small-time hooligans outside the school. I tried to tell the teacher, but my grades were at the bottom of the class, and no teacher liked a poor student. The head teacher told me, "Lucy, be more serious in class. Stop holding the class back. Don't always tattle and make small reports. Students should be united. And don't provoke people outside the school." I was severely reprimanded and had to write a 500-word self-criticism. When I left the school, it was almost dark. In the corner outside the school gate, those small-time hooligans were standing there waiting for me again. I had just received the subsidy for poor students in my pocket. I was waiting to go back and give it to my adoptive mother to cover the expenses for the next month or so. I stood inside the school gate, and the security guard impatiently urged me, "Go out quickly, the school is going to close." That's when Simon walked past me. He was a famous person in the school, an arrogant and unrestrained school bully whom everyone hated. It was said that before he was 10 years old, he had beaten the director of the orphanage into a lower limb disability. When he was 13, he fought with a boy and almost stabbed through the other's heart. Everyone hated him. But everyone was also afraid of him and didn't want to get close to him. I stood stiffly inside the school gate. Just as he was about to leave the school, on a whim, I followed closely behind him and walked out of the school gate. On that day, those small-time hooligans glared at me, but they didn't stop me, because the leader of the small-time hooligans was the person who had almost been stabbed through the heart by Simon. After that, every day after school, I finished my homework in the school. When Simon, who was always the last one to leave the school, slowly walked out of the school gate, I would follow closely behind him, until one evening half a month later, I followed him for a long way, after confirming that those small-time hooligans weren't following anymore and was about to take another route home. Simon, who had always seemed to be unaware and was walking in front of me, suddenly turned around and casually called out to me, "Hey!" My heart suddenly trembled. And even instinctively, I wanted to run. For a moment, my mind was filled with those overly bloody rumors about him in the school, until he slowly spoke again. "Aren't you supposed to pay me some protection money?" I was so scared that I didn't dare to run anymore. After a long while, I tremblingly took off my school bag and reached out to hand it to him. The young man was stunned for a moment. Then, he let out a soft laugh. I didn't have much money at hand and couldn't pay the protection money. But I carefully and actively offered to buy breakfast for Simon and carry his school bag. He probably found it interesting for a while and acquiesced to me continuing to go to and from school with him. Rumors began to spread in the school that Simon was in a relationship with a stupid and obtuse girl. That stupid girl, everyone knew, was referring to me. I was a premature baby with a low IQ, and almost everyone in the school knew about it. The rumors spread everywhere, and the president was furious. He called my adoptive mother and Simon's adoptive father. My head teacher shook his head and sighed. "It's bad enough that she doesn't strive for progress in her studies. Now this young girl has started a relationship. Is there any hope for her?" My adoptive mother was ashamed and called me a worthless thing that only knows how to throw herself at others, and raised her hand to slap me. Simon stepped forward and stood in front of me. He still had that casual look and smiled indifferently. "I'm the one chasing her, and she hasn't even agreed yet. Scold her gently, don't scare her, otherwise, she won't be willing to be with me even more." Simon's adoptive father felt ashamed and snatched an umbrella that belonged to some teacher nearby and directly whipped it across Simon's face. I saw the boy's body tremble. A long red mark appeared on his face, and he couldn't open his eyes for a while. Everyone in the school spread the word that Simon was chasing me. Those who had bullied me also started to avoid me when they saw me. This was exactly what I wanted. I changed from an isolated outsider to one of the two isolated outsiders who went to and from school with Simon, from junior high school all the way to high school graduation, and then, we entered the same university, an ordinary university that didn't have a good reputation. in the 5 years, the rumors about Simon chasing me never stopped. We were still isolated and still the outsiders who went in and out together, until I was 19 years old, and in my sophomore year, the vice director of the orphanage suddenly came to me. He said that after comparing my blood sample and information, he had found my family. He told me excitedly, "Your parents and elder brother are overjoyed and said they will come to pick you up soon." That night, I told Simon. He accompanied me and sat on a bench outside the school for the whole night. We were both abandoned children, but no one didn't long to return to their real home. My adoptive mother treated me badly, and his adoptive father was the same. I asked him, "Do you want to come with me? Before you find your family, my home can be shared with you." He turned his head to look at me and, just like when he first saw me, let out a soft laugh. "How can you be sure that your family will accept me?" I said seriously. "They definitely will. My biological parents must be the best people." He still had that indifferent look, smiled, and didn't say anything more, but later, I waited month after month, and the vice director didn't show up again. Simon accompanied me to the orphanage. Then, outside the director's office, we accidentally learned everything. My biological parents had a good family background. The director had evil intentions and swapped my information with that of his niece. His niece had already occupied my family and taken my place for almost half a year. Simon was calmer than me. He recorded everything, then reported it to the police and got the contact information of my biological parents. I don't really dare to think about what happened later. I was waiting for my parents to pick me up, and the director who was in detention instructed others to find me and Simon. Simon, with blood all over his face, told me to run out of the alley and call the police. When I rushed back with the police, I saw that scene, that arrogant, stubborn, and repulsive 19-year-old boy. He had become a body with a disfigured face and incomplete limbs. The director of the orphanage didn't originally intend to cause a death. He just instructed a mentally ill person to vent his anger for him. But a person with a mental illness couldn't control the force of his actions. Simon told me to leave him and run out of the alley, not for me to call the police but for me to survive. I woke up from the dream with a start. All over my body, I was already soaked in sweat. The wind blew in, and my eyes felt icy cold. I sat up from the bed and breathed heavily, but I still felt suffocated. That piece of paper that had disappeared slowly emerged in midair again. I stared at it and suddenly felt a bit choked up. I should have known better than to look for my family in the first place. The paper hung quietly in midair, and there were no words on it for a long time. I really felt guilty for making a school bully whom everyone avoided die at the age of 19. Even though I really didn't want to go through any more trouble, I still felt a bit sorry and said again, "If it really doesn't work, I'll delay it for another day and climb over the wall to help you get it, but it's really not decent. Can you give me a bit more of the money if I get it? When I die, there will definitely be no one to burn paper money for me." The paper floated in the air and swayed gently twice. Across 7 years of time, I seemed to see Simon again, who let out a soft laugh. After a while, more handwriting appeared on the paper. "You don't have to climb over the wall. Actually, it's under the osmanthus tree outside the north gate. It's my fault. I didn't make it clear. As for the money, how about I get 40% and you get 60%? I was taken aback for a moment. Then I remembered that what he had told me before was indeed under the osmanthus tree of Y City University. The only osmanthus tree in Y City University was outside the north gate, and there was no need to enter the school gate, so it seemed that I couldn't really blame him for not making it clear. I'm not very smart and am often a bit slow, but no one wants to admit that they have a low IQ, so I didn't say anything more. I just picked up the pen and wrote a single character on it. "Oh." The paper quickly responded, "Do you think it's too little? At most, I'll get 30% and you get 70%. How much money was actually in his piggy bank? I found it funny, but I also felt a bit sad. That sentence circled in my heart countless times. I wanted to ask him how he was doing over there, but in the end, I still held back and didn't say it. People who are dead probably can't be doing well, right? I put away the sleeping pills that I had with me again. I thought, I'll hold on for one more day. This time, it's really the last day. If I still can't find that piggy bank this time, I really won't look for it anymore. I got up and went to the bathroom to wash up. In the mirror, there was a pale face that was starting to look a bit terrifying. The warm feeling in my nose became more and more frequent, and the dull pain in my head gradually became more intense. I remembered what Lucas had said to me that day again. "Your face is as white as a ghost. Don't let yourself get contaminated by something dirty." I braced myself against the sink and took a moment to calm my breathing in the silence. It doesn't matter, I've been ignored for many years and have long been used to it. I took a taxi and went to Y City University again. This time, everything went unexpectedly smoothly. I easily found the golden osmanthus tree outside the north gate according to the location Simon had told me. The north gate was the most secluded side gate, with the fewest teachers and students coming and going, and no one paid attention to me. I brought tools and dug for half an hour. Surprisingly, I really dug out a piggy bank. It was made of wood and looked like a handmade item, after being buried in the soil for so many years. It hadn't rotted yet. The surface was mixed with dirt and was already old. My heart suddenly beat very fast. I quickly took it out and held it in my hands. Before I could take a closer look, Lucas's usual cold voice suddenly came from behind me. "What are you digging?" My heart suddenly sank. Instinctively, I got up in a hurry and hid the hand holding the piggy bank behind my back. Lucas took a few steps closer to me, his face looking unpleasant, something of Simon's. I felt increasingly uneasy. I kept retreating until my back hit the tree trunk. So many years had passed. Yet he still remembered Simon. Back when Simon had just died, I had fallen seriously ill and had a high fever that left me unconscious. When Lucas hastily came to pick me up, he had promised me that he would take good care of Simon's funeral arrangements. But later, when I had just recovered from my serious illness and repeatedly asked about Simon's ashes, he impatiently told me, "Who would really care? A little hooligan who almost killed someone before he was 10 years old. His death is doing the people a favor." Simon had died for me, but Lucas didn't know and didn't care. He, along with my parents, only said that Simon was unlucky, just like they thought I was unlucky, thinking that it was unlucky for me to study the funeral and interment major on my own and become an embalmer after graduation. I tightly held the jar in my hand and couldn't retreat any further. Subconsciously, I denied it. "No." Lucas frowned. "What are you hiding? Do you think I would snatch such a broken jar you dug up? I came to find you just to—" I stared at him warily. Before he could finish speaking, Jenny rushed out of the school with a beaming face. She rushed straight towards Lucas, her tone coquettish. "Brother, why didn't you say hello first when you came to find me? I've told you I can take care of myself. Aren't you and Mom and Dad going back to N City yet?" She hugged Lucas's arm, her voice soft and chattering non-stop. She pulled Lucas, wanting to enter the school. Lucas could never refuse her. He just glanced at me and said, "Wait for me there." I'm not stupid. Seeing them enter, I immediately hugged the jar and left in a hurry. My nosebleed started flowing again. As I ran towards the street, I randomly took out a tissue and covered my nose. But somehow, Lucas came back again. Seeing that I wasn't waiting in place, he chased after me angrily. I was extremely afraid that he would snatch the jar from me, just like when he angrily told me to return the plane ticket at the airport, and when he greeted the university president and deliberately prevented me from entering the university. I heard his approaching footsteps and his somewhat furious voice. "Lucy, stop right there. I have something to say to you." The more he chased, the more anxiously I ran. The midsummer wind was like a searing heat wave, making me dizzy. The pain in my head and joints started again, intense. I remembered the patients with terminal illnesses I had seen in the hospital before, on the verge of death. They were twitching in pain on the hospital beds, and even painkillers were ineffective. It was a life worse than death. I didn't want to wait until that day. As long as I burned the piggy bank for Simon, I could be free. As long as Lucas didn't catch up with me and as long as the thing in my hand wasn't snatched away by him, I ran so urgently. It wasn't until I reached the street and was about to reach out to hail a taxi in a panic that I suddenly realized that the tissue in my hand had fallen off at some point. There was still blood on it. My heart suddenly hung high. When I turned around, I saw Lucas standing not far behind me. He was only a few steps away from me, almost catching up with me, but he stopped there, not getting any closer to me and not looking at me either. In his hand, he had picked up the tissue I dropped. Almost the entire piece of paper was soaked with blood, scarlet, glaring, or in his words, probably unlucky and dirty. He lowered his eyes and stared at the paper. His expression was stiff and confused, as if facing something that was too strange and incomprehensible for him to understand. The north gate was remote, and it took a long time to wait for a taxi. I had to stand on the street for a while longer, watching him warily and defensively. It took him a while to look at me. His voice, which was always cold before, suddenly became a bit hoarse. "Where did this come from? Blood? What's wrong with you?" Now he had taken over the Lincoln family's company and had been in the business world for many years. This resolute and eloquent man was now also stuttering. It seemed that he was flustered and afraid that something had happened to me. I just found it ridiculous. He looked at me, staring at my face. It seemed that he finally noticed something. Perhaps there was some blood that I hadn't wiped clean beside my nose, or perhaps, as he said, my face had a strange color as if I had been contaminated by something dirty. After a while, he seemed to finally come to his senses suddenly. He was in a hurry, looking astonished. Even his figure was a bit staggering as he quickly walked towards me. I suddenly remembered that many years ago, when he first found me, he rushed to the university to pick me up at night and also rushed towards me in such a way. He apologized to me, saying that he had let me live outside for so many years. He said that in the future, he would do his best to compensate me and take good care of me. At that time, I believed him, and now, as he approached me in a panic, he spoke urgently. "Lucy, are you sick? Have you been to the hospital? Let's go to the hospital. I'll accompany you, this time." I didn't hesitate at all. I hailed the finally passing taxi and quickly got in. I didn't even want to say one more word to him. The moment the car door closed, I heard Lucas's extremely anxious voice. "Lucy, let's have a good talk, okay?" I suddenly thought it was really strange. Before, he didn't like me, even if I lingered in the Lincoln family every day. It was hard to run into him from morning to night. Now that I've moved out, it seems that no matter where I go, I can run into him. The elder brother who used to dislike me everywhere, now shows this kind of expression when I finally decide to leave with a broken heart. Have a talk. I just found it funny. In the 7 years since I returned to the Lincoln family, my so-called parents and elder brother, who didn't even want to return a surname to me, what was there between us that we hadn't finished talking about in a full 7 years? What was it that needed to be talked about now? I didn't want to look at him anymore. I just carefully hugged the piggy bank and told the driver to drive. Lucas's expression became uncontrolled. He rushed to the car door and desperately knocked on the window. His face even became a bit terrified, so out of control. I had never seen him like this before. His lips opened and closed anxiously, but the car window completely blocked his voice. As the taxi drove away, I turned my head and didn't want to look at him anymore. I just tightly hugged the piggy bank. Then opened my phone and booked the nearest flight to a coastal city. After asking the driver to drive directly to the airport, I entered the airport and passed the ticket checkpoint. Lucas didn't chase after me anymore. Perhaps he couldn't catch up, or perhaps he gave up. For me, it no longer mattered. Burn the piggy bank and then go to the beach. This time, I can finally be free. My soul will stay in the sea. It's vast and free there, just like the place where Simon's ashes were scattered. Perhaps there, our souls will meet again. I sat in the airport waiting hall. I carefully placed the piggy bank on my lap. Only then did I finally heave a sigh of relief and have the time to carefully examine it. Its surface was covered with too much dirt. After all these years, it was obviously old. The opening where things were stuffed in was also tightly blocked by dirt, and nothing inside could be seen. I didn't know if the things inside would still be intact when Simon saw them after I burned it. Out of the corner of my eye, that piece of paper floated in front of me again. The people sitting next to me didn't react, obviously, only I could see it. I was so shocked that I almost blurted out, "Aren't you afraid of the light?" Before, he would only come to me at night. When I returned to my bedroom, Simon seemed not to understand my words. After a while, he replied to me on the paper in confusion. Why should I be afraid of the light? I held up the piggy bank for the paper to see and then said a bit awkwardly, "That's what the books say." The paper trembled, as if he was laughing. New handwriting emerged. "The person who wrote the book is alive. Can he understand better than me?" It seemed to make sense. I felt a bit sad, but also thought it was quite interesting. I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. Over the years, it seemed that only he could still make me laugh. Someone next to me looked at me with a frightened expression. I didn't mean to scare others. I immediately got up and left, finding a corner where no one noticed and sat down. I looked at the paper. "Shall I take the piggy bank to the beach and burn it for you?" Simon didn't have a grave. When he was alive, he once told me that he hoped his ashes would be scattered into the sea after his death. He said it was too stuffy underground. It would be better to go to the sea, where the world was vast and free, after his passing. His ashes were placed in the funeral parlor, unclaimed. After I barely recovered from my serious illness, I claimed his ashes and scattered them into the sea. The paper replied to me, "Okay, thank you for your trouble." After staying in the underworld for a few years, he had become polite. I discussed with him and then worried a bit. The sea is so vast. If I burn it on the beach, will you definitely receive it? He replied to me, yes, the ocean is connected to the heaven and earth, and it can also be connected to the souls of the dead. I still didn't feel very reassured and subconsciously asked, would it be better if I brought it to you in person? Anyway, I was going to jump into the sea. The paper froze in the air. For a while, it didn't move at all. After a long time, my name was written on it almost stroke by stroke, very slowly, Lucy. It was as if that person was calling me in a worried and uneasy tone. Oh, he probably still didn't know that I was about to die. I smiled awkwardly. Just kidding. The paper ignored me for a long time. I even thought it was going to disappear when new words emerged on it, more scrawled than before. It seemed that he was a bit unhappy, not funny. I looked at those words that kept emerging and then disappearing. Actually, I wasn't completely indifferent to the fact that I was about to die. The pain in my head started again, convulsively and severely. My bones hurt, and my gums hurt too. The doctor said that in the late stage of leukemia, abnormal white blood cells infiltrate the bone marrow and other tissues, causing severe pain in many places such as the bone marrow and joints is a normal phenomenon. The pain always comes without warning. My body uncontrollably curled up, and I wanted to squat down. That piece of paper was still floating in front of me. I wasn't sure if he could see me since he could talk to me. A drop of nosebleed dripped onto my collar. I hastily turned my back, facing away from the paper. Then, using the excuse of going to the restroom, I left in a hurry. The paper didn't follow. I entered a restroom cubicle and locked the door. Then I randomly stuffed a few painkillers and swallowed them dry. But the effect of the medicine was getting worse day by day. I still hurt. I curled up in the cubicle, exhausted and unconscious for a while. Fortunately, when I woke up, the boarding time hadn't passed yet. My name was being called on the radio. I quickly went out, splashed some cold water on my face, and then passed the boarding gate. I didn't see that piece of paper again and secretly heaved a sigh of relief. If possible, I also didn't want him to see me in such a sorry state. My phone was ringing. Lucas was calling. I pressed to hang up, and he immediately sent messages in succession. Lucy, where on earth are you? Be good and tell your brother, let's talk things out. Don't make jokes about your own body. To be honest, it was really disgusting. I didn't reply to him. He sent another message. Mom and Dad have cooked a meal and are waiting for you to come back. Will you come back to N City with me? From now on, there will only be the four of us in the family. No Jenny. Is that okay? Is that okay? What magnanimous and condescending words. I deleted the message and then added his number. Along with the numbers of everyone in the Lincoln family, I dragged them all into the blacklist. A person on the verge of death, the so-called family affection that I had longed for so many years. I no longer needed it now. I no longer needed anything. I crossed the boarding gate and entered the cabin. There was nothing left for me to miss in the human world. The plane took me to the beach. I was going there to see a dead person. Lucas discovered that Lucy had really disappeared. She was acting strangely. He didn't know what she had dug up under the osmanthus tree outside Y City University. Just like her strange trip to Y City and her attempt to enter Y City University, Lucas always felt that she had been very strange recently. But over the years, there had been too little communication between him and her. He couldn't figure out her thoughts. And he couldn't bring himself to ask her or care about her. The relationship between them had always been stiff, awkward, and strange. It all started 7 years ago when he broke his promise and didn't take care of Simon's funeral arrangements. At that time, Lucy had lost control of her emotions and had a big fight with him. When the Lincoln family asked her to stay at home to continue recuperating, she almost smashed everything in the house. She also scolded Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln and him, her elder brother, to pieces. She said they were hypocritical, disgusting, and sanctimonious, making her sick. Even when Jenny went to her bedroom at night to persuade her, she threw a fruit knife at Jenny, almost blinding one of Jenny's eyes. She was so overbearing, so rude, so crazy. The people in the Lincoln family thought that she had become like this. The prime culprit was that little hooligan Simon, who had almost killed someone before he was 10 years old. He had led the little girl of the Lincoln family astray. Mrs. Lincoln couldn't accept that her once lively and well-behaved daughter had turned into such a gloomy and fierce look. the little girl who used to like pink and princess dresses, and beautiful cakes. Now she had become disgusted with sweets. Even the ornaments on her bedside were only dull black and gray. She didn't look at all like the little girl Lucy who had been lost by the Lincoln family. In contrast, Jenny was just like her. Jenny liked all things pink, liked beautiful hairpins and cakes. She would accompany Mrs. Lincoln to go shopping and to the beauty salon. She would tell Mrs. Lincoln all the interesting things that happened at school. Even her taste and food taboos were exactly the same as Lucy's. So when Lucy came back and Jenny was supposed to leave, and Lucas and Mr. Lincoln were going to send her away, Mrs. Lincoln chased after them and tightly grabbed Jenny's arm. She almost had a heart attack on the spot. She sobbed until she choked. It's just about raising one more child. The Lincoln family is not short of money. Just consider it sponsoring a student and let her stay here for foster care first. It was raining outside. Jenny and Mrs. Lincoln were hugging and crying in the front yard. Lucy was standing on the steps outside the villa entrance, watching silently and indifferently. Mrs. Lincoln took a look at her from a distance and was so scared that she took a step back. Jenny could let Mrs. Lincoln live in a dream, as if her daughter was still the way she was before she got lost. But Lucy's appearance, Mrs. Lincoln found it a bit hard to accept. So over the years, Jenny had continued to live in the Lincoln family. It was said that Lucy was the real daughter, and Jenny was just in foster care. But was that really the case? Jenny had a pink luxury car and a handbag worth millions. Even when she went back to university, the whole family would crowded her there. And Lucy, what did Lucy have? Lucas was holding the blood-soaked tissue in his hand, watching Lucy get into the taxi and leave with a cold and indifferent face without hesitation. He suddenly thought that it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. The taxi drove away with a whoosh. Lucas suddenly had a very bad premonition. Lucy's increasingly pale face might just be because she was sick. Very sick. Lucas still remembered that before Lucy got lost, she fell on the way home from school and scraped her knee a little. When she got home, she would cry and tell her parents and her elder brother. But now, regarding her body and her illness, apparently, she didn't even have the slightest desire to tell them a single word. It was as if an invisible hand suddenly clenched Lucas's heart tightly. He felt stuffy and a bit breathless. He couldn't quite say why. He was in a hurry to catch up with Lucy, but there were too few taxis coming and going outside the north gate. His own car was still parked at the south gate. By the time he hailed a taxi and chased after her, the car Lucy was in was already out of sight. He didn't even have the slightest clue about where Lucy might have gone, not even a guess. If it were Jenny, he would definitely be able to find her quickly. He knew the beauty salon that Jenny liked to go to the most when she was in N City and the address of her best friend's house. He knew the shopping mall that Jenny liked to stroll around the most when she was studying at the university in Y City. He had the contact information of her best friend and the hair salon where she often went and had a membership card. Mrs. Lincoln would always remind him over and over again to remember these things well and firmly. Jenny was young and naive and needed adults to take care of her. But Lucy, suddenly, besides being flustered, Lucas also seemed to feel fear. He knew almost nothing about Lucy. Since when had the foster child Jenny taken up all the attention and care of the people in the Lincoln family? Lucas didn't know where he could look for Lucy. Lucy was sick, and she might go to the hospital. But he searched all the hospitals, big and small, in Y City and couldn't find her, no matter where he went. He couldn't find her anymore. Towards evening, he began to realize that Lucy might have already left Y City. Lucas contacted his assistant and asked him to check Lucy's ticket and flight ticket purchase records. The assistant quickly gave a reply and found the flight tickets and high-speed rail tickets that Lucy had bought. But there were not just one, but a full 3. The times were all in the afternoon or evening of today. One was to N City, one was to H City, and one was to B City. Each thousands of miles apart. She couldn't possibly go to so many places in half a day. Most likely, she did this on purpose so that the people in the Lincoln family couldn't determine her whereabouts. Lucas stood on the street as the lights were just coming on. The summer night wind, however, made him shiver. He was in a daze. Does she hate us that much? The assistant on the other side was confused. Mr. Lucas, what did you say? Lucas hung up the phone, then he murmured to comfort himself. She must have gone home. She must have gone back to N City. Yes, she's gone home. Lucas returned to N City and went home. He pushed open the door, and there was no sign of Lucy inside. Mrs. Lincoln was sitting on the sofa, chatting with Jenny on the phone. She was smiling so that her eyes and eyebrows were curved. Baby, you're flattering Mom again. Are you short of money again, right? Alright, I'll transfer it to you, Mr. Lincoln, who was reading the newspaper, glanced over when he heard this. You just spoil her, she's becoming more and more extravagant. Although he was scolding, his tone was full of indulgence that couldn't be hidden. Lucas walked over. He threw his briefcase on the coffee table with a sudden dull thud. He said expressionlessly, Lucy should be coming back soon. Clean up her bedroom. The smile on Mrs. Lincoln's face quickly disappeared. The woman's expression froze, and she quickly became extremely awkward. Ah, she's coming back. It seemed that the idea of Lucy coming back and living at home was an extremely strange thing. So strange that it was terrifying. Lucas met her gaze and nodded. Yes, is that not okay? The phone hadn't been hung up yet, and Jenny screamed on the other side. Is Lucy coming back? No way, Mom's heart disease hasn't fully recovered yet. She touches dead people all day long. Maybe she comes back with blood on her that hasn't been washed off. No way, she's not allowed to come back. Lucas knew that Mrs. Lincoln had always had a weak heart, especially in those years when Lucy was lost. Mrs. Lincoln was so worried that she fell ill. She had several serious heart attacks and almost died. Later, it was only because Jenny was lively and good at pleasing people that Mrs. Lincoln's condition gradually stabilized. Also for this reason, Lucas had always followed his mother's wishes and indulged Jenny, but now, for some reason, his emotions suddenly got out of control. He clenched his fists, and the veins on the back of his hands stood out. He roared angrily, Who the hell do you think you are? When did it become your turn to decide whether she comes back or not? There was a sudden silence on the other side. After a while, there was a pitiful cry. Mrs. Lincoln immediately coaxed eagerly, Jenny, your brother didn't mean that. She looked sideways at Lucas and scolded him angrily. How can you talk to your sister like that? Apologize. Lucas looked at her, at his own mother. This mother who had been living in a dream for 7 years and had been reluctant to face reality. After a long time, he finally said hoarsely, Mom, do you really still remember clearly who your own daughter is? Suddenly, Mrs. Lincoln couldn't say a word. Mr. Lincoln, who was still holding the newspaper, also suddenly froze. Lucas gave a soft laugh, but his eyes were filled with grief. Dad, Mom, wake up, all of us, wake up. Mrs. Lincoln's hand trembled. The phone in her hand suddenly fell to the ground. Lucas sat down on the sofa opposite them. The living room fell into a deathly silence. For a long time, none of them spoke. On this midsummer night, everything was silent, like a silent lingering death for them. Do they really still remember who their own daughter is? Do they really still remember who their own sister is? Do they really still remember that it should be Lucy who originally had the surname Lou, not Jenny? 7 years had passed. It had been too long. It seemed that none of them remembered anymore. During the years when Lucy was lost, Mrs. Lincoln bought countless beautiful dresses and lovely Barbie dolls for her, but later, the Lucy who came back said that she no longer liked these delicate and soft things. Mrs. Lincoln was extremely sad. While Jenny happily accepted them, she said sweetly, Thank you, Mom. So, the sweet-mouthed child got all the candies and all the love, but was it really supposed to be like this? For a very, very long time, none of them moved, until it was close to midnight and the hands of the clock on the wall approached 12 o'clock. Mrs. Lincoln then looked dazed and stood up in a trance. She walked towards the kitchen, murmuring to herself, Maybe she hasn't had dinner yet. I'll cook for her. She's coming back soon. The nanny came over to help, but Mrs. Lincoln pushed her away. I'll cook for her myself. Lucy likes the food I cook the most. There were all kinds of ingredients in the refrigerator. Mrs. Lincoln prepared the cutting board, washed the kitchen knife, and cleaned the pot, but when she looked at the dazzling array of ingredients, she didn't know what to take. Lucy before the age of 10, before she got lost, liked to eat sweet and sour spare ribs and fried meatballs, just like Jenny. But the Lucy who was found at the age of 19 would never reach for the sweet and sour spare ribs and fried meatballs on the dining table. Jenny ate with oil all over her mouth, holding the remaining spare ribs and meatballs in the plate. She tilted her head and asked Lucy, Sister, aren't you going to eat? Lucy didn't even want to take a look. She would only eat a little of the vegetables in front of her. She didn't have any preferences for the types of vegetables either. She would eat whatever was on the table. Mrs. Lincoln thought back and then began to remember. Lucy's taste had changed, and in these 7 years, the number of times she ate at home was also very few. Suddenly, her heart ached terribly, and Lucas's words echoed in her mind. Mom, do you really still remember clearly who your own daughter is? The phone rang again. Jenny called again. Mrs. Lincoln didn't answer. And the other side kept calling and calling. When she pressed to answer, there was an extremely dissatisfied voice on the other side. Mom, transfer the money quickly. My friends and I are waiting to use it. Mrs. Lincoln stared blankly at the phone screen. It took her a while to speak. Didn't I just transfer $100,000 to you at the beginning of the month? Jenny screamed. What can $100,000 do? It's gone after one meal. Suddenly, Mrs. Lincoln thought of Lucy again. In the 7 years since she returned to the Lincoln family, her biological daughter, who had never asked for a single cent from the Lincoln family, the hand holding the phone trembled more and more. She was in a daze. If it were Lucy, $100,000 could. On the other side of the phone, there were the laughter of men and women. Jenny, I said the Lincoln family wouldn't be reluctant to give you money and instead go to support your stupid poor sister, right? Jenny probably had never lost face like this before. Her voice suddenly became extremely angry and unbearable. Transfer the money to me quickly. Lucy deals with dead people all day long and lives frugally. What money does she need? Suddenly, Mrs. Lincoln clenched her hand tightly. Her body trembled, and she almost fell down. After a long time, she murmured, My Lucy was also raised as a little princess in the Lincoln family before she got lost. Just like you are now, all these should have been hers. There was a burst of laughter from a group of men and women on the other side. And Jenny's furious refutation. Gradually, Mrs. Lincoln's eyes turned red. After a long time, Mr. Lincoln stumbled in and took the phone. The call was hung up, the sharp and angry voice on the other side, and then the terrified cry, stopped abruptly. Mrs. Lincoln's hand was still shaking. She randomly took out some ingredients. Big beads of sweat dripped down her forehead. She thought that summer was getting hotter and hotter. Was the air conditioner broken? Why was she sweating all over? She cut the vegetables and then put them in the hot oil pan. When a full table of dishes was set, it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. Mrs. Lincoln looked sideways at Lucas and Mr. Lincoln, who were still sitting on the sofa, motionless. She said hoarsely, Lucas, go and take a look at the door. Lucas looked at her, under the light. His face was extremely pale. In his eyes, it was impossible to tell whether it was indifference, anger, hatred, or pain and guilt. After a long time, he finally said, She won't come back. Actually, ever since that taxi drove away in front of his eyes, ever since Lucy got into the car in a hurry, as if he were some kind of ferocious beast and didn't even want to look at him again. Actually, at that time, he already knew. She was gone. He couldn't catch up with her, couldn't find her, and she would never come back again. Lucas left home. He was in a daze and searched for Lucy all night. Lucy had bought a small house with a down payment, near the funeral parlor. The location was inauspicious, but it was very cheap. Over the years, she rarely went home to live. Probably, she usually lived in that small house. Lucas didn't know the address and spent a lot of effort to find it out. He went there, but Lucy wasn't there. The property management told him that Lucy had paid off the mortgage on the house and had asked an intermediary to sell it. She had made a will notarization at the law firm and would donate all the money from selling the house after her death. Lucas couldn't understand. He knew that Lucy was heartbroken and left, but what did will and after death mean? She was only 26 years old. She had just celebrated her birthday last month. Lucas looked at the property management in a daze. Why does she want to sell the house? Why does she leave a will so early? The property management had a strange expression and asked him in return, Who are you? When Lucas spoke, he seemed a bit guilty and looked away. I'm her elder brother. The man showed a somewhat shocked expression. She actually has an elder brother. Why Lucy wanted to sell the house and why she left a will, he, a close blood elder brother, didn't know. So why did he think that a property management person would know? In the property management office, several inquiring and implicitly scrutinizing gazes fell on him. Lucas felt extremely ashamed and fled almost in a panic. He wandered around in a daze all night and then went to the funeral parlor early the next morning. Lucy had a withdrawn personality and had always had a distant relationship with her colleagues. The people in the funeral parlor also knew that she always came and went alone. For this person who suddenly showed up and claimed to be Lucy's elder brother, everyone thought he was a liar or had a problem with his mind. No one was willing to pay attention to him. Lucas was driven out. After several days of searching, he found nothing, until on the third day, he suddenly received a call from the hospital. The other side told him that Lucy was in the late stage of leukemia and didn't have much time left. She repeatedly told us not to tell anyone about her illness, but I asked her to leave an emergency contact number. After thinking for a long time, she still filled in your number. I thought for a long time and thought that perhaps she left your number, actually. She also hoped that you would know. Anyone in this situation would probably hope to have someone to rely on because of fear. The voice on the other side was intermittent and gradually getting more and more distant. Lucas stood stiffly under the scorching sun, but his whole body was like an ice sculpture in the heavy snow. Lucas couldn't move. She sold the house and left a will. She went alone to a place where no one knew. It was only at this moment that Lucas suddenly understood that she was going to face death. Tremendous fear engulfed him like a ferocious beast. An invisible hand choked his throat, and he felt more and more suffocated. He wanted to move, wanted to call for help, wanted to rush to Lucy's side. However, he just couldn't move at all. She said not to tell anyone, but she left your number, perhaps. She hoped that you would know and hoped to have someone to rely on. Lucy, hurry up and apologize to Jenny. Lucy, you're so gloomy and terrifying all over. Where do you still look like a living person? Lucy, return the plane ticket. Lucy, don't follow us. She probably hoped to have someone to rely on. Lucas gasped for breath with great effort. However, he still couldn't breathe. The traffic was like a flowing river, and the world was spinning. He opened his mouth, wanting to call Lucy's name. Then, suddenly, his body swayed and he fainted to the ground. Lucas's president's special assistant was a capable person well known in the Liu family. In just a few days, he had, as Lucas requested, found out everything. He came to the hospital ward with a thick file bag to hand it to Lucas. What he saw, however, was Lucas with a blank expression and already wearing a breathing apparatus. Lucas's phone was still lying beside him, and the screen was on. There was a photo posted by a netizen on it. In the photo, it was dim all around. A woman was standing in the deep sea. The sea water had already reached her waist. There was text below the photo. I took a picture of the sea during the bonfire party. I didn't notice there was a figure in the photo until I got back. The photo was marked with a time, which was the night Lucy disappeared. Nearly a week had passed since then. The assistant didn't recognize that figure, but in his heart, he already had a vague guess. If that figure was walking towards death, then now, a full week had passed. Obviously, no one could save her anymore. The information in the file bag recorded the nearly 10 years when Lucy was lost. She was successively sold by human traffickers and later abandoned by the buyer. After that, she entered an orphanage. Due to her delayed development and low IQ, she was isolated and bullied. And then she left the orphanage. Later, she was picked up and taken home on a whim by a woman. Before long, her adoptive mother became pregnant with a boy and began to loathe her extremely. She picked up and wore a pink dress that other children didn't want. On the way home from school, she was stopped and bullied by a drunkard. She ran home and cried to her adoptive mother, but her adoptive mother slapped her in the face and said, "Where did you steal such a pink dress? Wearing it like this, can you blame others for bothering you?" After that, Lucy no longer liked pink. She began to like black and gray, and liked to wear long clothes and trousers that wrapped herself up in a gloomy and tight way. At the dining table, she picked up a piece of spare rib. Her younger brother burst into tears, and her adoptive mother knocked the chopsticks out of her hand. After that, she liked to eat the green vegetables that were always placed in front of her. In nearly 10 years, it wasn't that she didn't want to be lively and innocent anymore. It was that no one would allow a girl who was struggling to survive alone to still maintain that unrestrained innocence. The people in the Lincoln family were not unaware that a child who had been lost for nearly 10 years could no longer be the same as before. They just chose to blind themselves and live in a dream. They told themselves that everything was still the same as before, in an attempt to relieve that overwhelming sense of guilt, as heavy as a boulder, that had oppressed them for nearly 10 years. And Jenny, the niece of the orphanage director, her parents died in a car accident while running away due to financial crimes. The director fabricated a tragic and innocent background for her. He managed to find out all the likes and dislikes of the child lost by the Lincoln family in the past. He made Jenny learn to imitate and then replace. Lucas took those documents, and his eyes gradually became bloodshot. The great pain, anger, and breakdown finally all turned into powerlessness. Jenny ran away after learning that Lucas had someone find out everything. The special assistant told Lucas, "Mr. Lucas, don't worry, I've already sent someone to bring her back." Lucas stared at him blankly. and all he could see was a sea of blood in front of him. Bring Jenny back. And then what? Then what? Then, will Lucy come back? No, never again. Lucas coughed violently. Then he pounced towards the bedside. Breaking free from the breathing apparatus, suddenly, he vomited out a large mouthful of blood. Outside the door, Mr. and Mrs. Lincoln stood there and witnessed everything. The special assistant, feeling uneasy, revealed the last thing that had been found out. Mr. Simon, who passed away, was your sister's only friend during those years. The things about him killing and hurting people were all made up. He was killed because he helped your sister find her family. There was a bang sound outside the ward door. Mrs. Lincoln staggered and fell to the ground, fainting in grief. Lucas spat out blood and then stared blankly towards the door. In his gradually blurring vision, he met Mr. Lincoln's gaze. When their eyes met, only despair remained. It was too late, too late. That little girl who should have been carefully cared for and tried her best to be compensated by everyone in the Lincoln family. She got lost once and then came back, but this time, she would never come back. It was already evening when I landed in H City. When I turned on my phone, there were nearly 100 missed calls and unread text messages on it. Without exception, they all came from the Lincoln family, from my so-called elder brother, and my parents who had hardly contacted me in 7 years. A new call came in again. After 7 years, it seemed that they suddenly started to care about me, or they were afraid that if something happened to me, it would damage their reputation as parents and an elder brother. I took out the SIM card and deleted all the information and data in my phone. I went to the beach and left my phone in a more conspicuous place on the beach. I didn't need it anymore. Perhaps, if the person who picked it up needed it, they could even exchange it for some money. The piece of paper guided me here. I looked at the familiar sea surface and the familiar scene, vaguely. I remembered that perhaps it was here that I scattered Simon's ashes 7 years ago. The sea was so vast that I couldn't remember the exact location where I came before. Fortunately, the piece of paper remembered. I squatted by the seaside, stacked some firewood, and then put the piggy bank into the fire. The flames slowly engulfed it, and the piece of paper floated silently beside me. The sound of the rolling tides lasted for a long time. The cool wind of the summer night was like guiding me towards the depths of the ocean. Not far away, there were faint sounds of cheering and laughter. I looked sideways and saw that in the distance, there was a faint firelight. The crowd was gathered in the twilight. There should be a bonfire party there. I looked over and, somehow, stared for a while. How many years had it been since I had no one by my side? I couldn't remember. Probably when I stepped into the depths of the ocean, when this life ended sloppily, no one would care either. I looked for a while and then take back my gaze. There had been no words on the piece of paper for a long time. The last corner of the piggy bank was completely turned into ashes. I looked at the piece of paper and smiled, half-jokingly saying, I did what I said. We agreed on a 40-60 split. I'll come to get my share soon. Don't go back on your word then. If I could really see that person again after death, perhaps, death would no longer be about fear, but could be regarded as the greatest blessing. But I knew that the possibility of this was extremely slim. The world was so big. Once two people were truly separated, it would be difficult for them to meet again for the rest of their lives. It was probably the same in the underworld. It wasn't that easy to meet. The piggy bank turned to ashes, and the last spark of the firewood gradually went out completely. I stepped into the sea water. The waves licked my insteps, luring me towards a deeper distance. Suddenly, the piece of paper rushed in front of my eyes. I thought he would stop me. However, he didn't. The paper remained blank all the time. I stood in the deep sea, and the sea water submerged my legs. It just floated beside me, fluttering gently in the sea breeze. It accompanied me towards the deep sea, towards death. Until the sea water rose above my waist, I felt that my body would be rolled up by the waves in the next moment and then swept into the deep sea. Only then did hasty words suddenly appear on the piece of paper. How about giving it another try? What to try? He didn't write anymore. Try to get love, try to struggle with the illness in a life worse than death, and then still be doomed to live not much longer. Try to struggle bitterly in a life that has never been favored by luck and suffer an extra hardship in vain. I didn't really want to, so I said softly, no. The piece of paper finally fell down. It weakly and gently stuck to the side of my face. It was like that person had broken through the barrier between the living and the dead and carefully hugged me. The sea water at night was too cold, and the sea breeze was too strong. He seemed to be trying to give me a little warmth. trying to tell me that death was not a good solution, and the world was not only cold. However, the piece of paper had no temperature, the dead could no longer warm the living, the piece of paper clung tightly to my face, trembling desperately, then it finally lost its strength and was blown away by the sea breeze. The sea water was about to roll up my body, at the moment before stepping into death. Suddenly, I kicked something at my feet, it was cold and stiff. But it seemed that there was still a little bit of the touch of flesh left. I had dealt with the dead for so many years and was too familiar with this feeling. I quickly realized that what I had kicked seemed to be a corpse, in the sea at night, suddenly kicking a corpse at my feet. What a terrifying thing. I seemed to hear Lucas's furious words again in my ears. Look at you, you're so gloomy and terrifying all over. Where do you still look like a living person? Maybe what he said was right. I wasn't scared, even because the sea water was too deep and I couldn't see clearly what was at my feet. I reached my hand into the sea, groped for the person's arm, and then lifted it up with some effort. Through the sea surface at night, I finally vaguely saw it, the person's deathly white hand, back and wrist covered with scars, and then the sleeve of the police uniform. It was a policeman. It didn't look like suicide. It was more like he was killed by someone. I stared blankly for a long time. I thought I was really ridiculous. Obviously, I was going to die myself, but it seemed that I was still a bit worried about a corpse. I wondered if he was someone important. If I left him here, wouldn't it be long before the rising tide would roll him into the deep sea and make him disappear completely? I looked at the piece of paper that was still floating beside me. After a long while, when I spoke, even I thought it was funny. Hey, do you think I should call the police first? The piece of paper silently stuck to my chest and hugged me. I clearly couldn't see that person, but in an instant, it seemed that I saw his face and heard his voice. Just like many years ago, he said, Lucy, do as you want, whether it's to live or to die. I dragged the corpse to a position closer to the beach. When I estimated that he should be less likely to be washed away by the sea water, I was already sweating profusely. The bonfire party in the distance had already ended. I had no one to ask for help, so I could only pick up the phone that was still left on the beach and called the police. Then I sat on the beach at night and quietly looked at the dark sea surface. The tides roared, but it was silent all around. I was already soaked through, and the wind blowing on me made me feel a bit cold. But I didn't move. I looked at the piece of paper next to me and smiled self-deprecatingly, saying, why do I feel that it's quite hard for me to die? The piece of paper didn't respond for a long time. When I was very tired and wanted to take a nap, words slowly appeared on it. It seemed a bit awkward, and the words were written hesitantly and slowly. Perhaps, there is a better future waiting for you. The school bully who was rumored to have killed someone at the age of 10 could actually say such an elegant sentence. I let out a soft laugh at the most inappropriate time. He seemed a bit embarrassed and didn't say anything more. I didn't wait for a long time, and the police rushed to the beach. I briefly explained the situation, omitting details such as my intention to jump into the sea. I just said that I was beachcombing by the sea, kicked something and fell down, and accidentally found the corpse in the sea. The police made a record and took pictures of the scene. I noticed that some police officers showed very strange expressions. They opened their phones again and seemed to compare the deceased with a photo. Then they asked me, do you have time? Would it be convenient for you to go to the police station with us to make a simple record? Actually, I didn't have much time. I was in a hurry to die. The taste of being seriously ill was really uncomfortable. Living one more day was really unpleasant. I didn't have to suffer this, but looking at the expressions of the police, they weren't really asking me, in the middle of the night, saying that a corpse was found by the sea. Probably, I at least had to initially prove that I really had nothing to do with the death of the deceased. I sighed and nodded. Okay, it seemed that since I found out about my terminal illness and prepared for death, all kinds of unexpected changes kept happening, preventing me from dying smoothly. Probably my luck was really too bad. I couldn't live well when I wanted to live before. Now that I want to die, I can't die well either. I went to the police station with them. Fortunately, the police didn't intend to make things difficult for me. They thanked me on behalf of the deceased. They simply asked me again about the process before and after I found the corpse. After recording my personal information, they told me that I could leave. When I got up to go out, I took a last look at the corpse. Over the years, I have seen countless deceased people. Before putting the deceased into the coffin, it is common to help the deceased with limb suture repair or facial repair, but I had really never seen such a horribly mutilated deceased person. He was missing a leg, and both of his arms were so injured that the bones were visible. It seemed that in the next moment, they would fall off his body. The skin exposed outside was covered with hideous scars, his face was swollen terribly by the water, and between his eyes, there were only 2 terrifying holes left. Such a tragic appearance formed a huge contrast with the solemn police uniform on his body. I really couldn't help but take a few more looks. When I was walking out, I heard the sad and suppressed voices of the police behind me. It's probably difficult to repair the corpse. It's not good to ask too many people for help. He still has a daughter who has just started primary school. It's better not to spread the news that the corpse has been recovered. I vaguely guessed that he should be an undercover police officer who had encountered revenge or something like that. It was already late at night. I pushed open the door of the police station, and the evening wind in the midsummer rushed in with a wave of heat. I walked out and then suddenly stopped in my tracks. I turned back, pushed the door open, and returned to the police station. Several police officers looked at me in surprise. I didn't hesitate anymore and tentatively said, "Do you need my help?" The police officers looked puzzled and didn't understand what I meant. I explained, "I have been an embalmer for several years and know some techniques of corpse suture and repair. If you don't mind, should be able to give it a try." Over the years, I had never taken the initiative to mention my occupation to anyone, no matter who knew about it. They would respond to me with looks of disgust or fear. This was the first time I didn't hide it. Several police officers were a bit hesitant. "Miss Lucy, will this be too much trouble for you?" I continued, "Don't worry, I have no other intentions. 7 years ago, I received great help from the police, so I thought that if there was a chance, I could see if I could repay them a little. 7 years ago, the director of the orphanage instructed a mentally ill person to brutally kill Simon. I couldn't find strong evidence to accuse the director of the orphanage, and the murderer escaped all punishments because of his mental illness. The Lincoln family said that Simon had led me astray and was unwilling to help find the real culprit. Simon's adoptive father just regretted losing a dog to vent his anger on, but some police officers took the case I reported and then paid out of their own pockets to help me find a lawyer. The case was finally investigated clearly after more than half a year, and the director of the orphanage was sentenced to death. Over the years, I have been unable to repay them, but I have never forgotten." The police officers thanked me in a trembling voice. "Miss Lucy, thank you so much." After learning about my occupation, they didn't show the fear or rejection that I had expected on their faces. I stayed at the police station. In the makeshift embalmer's workshop, I began to repair the body, as quickly as possible. I managed to basically complete the repair of the body in 1 day and 2 nights. The lost left leg was replaced with a stitched prosthetic limb. After that, I didn't continue and ended the repair. The deceased should be laid to rest in the earth and should not stay here for too long, because the body had been soaked in the sea water for too long and was severely mutilated. I tried my best, but I felt that the repair result was still not satisfactory. A female police officer came in to check. I said guiltily, "Sorry, the repair isn't good enough." The police officer walked to the side of the ice coffin, approached silently, and gently leaned her face close to his. Perhaps she was afraid of ruining the restored appearance of the deceased. She got very close, but there was no actual skin-to-skin contact. I looked at her profile and suddenly thought, perhaps she was his lover or a relative. After a long time, she turned around. She regained her impeccable and calm expression, and her voice was slightly hoarse. "It's already very, very good. Thank you so much, Miss Lucy." After a while, she said again, "On behalf of the police station, can I invite you to have a meal?" I looked at her face, which was clearly filled with grief, but she was trying to act calm. I suddenly remembered the night when Simon left, in that alley that night. When I suddenly went back, I also saw his horribly mutilated body. I thought that I could probably understand the intense pain she was feeling at the moment. The words of refusal came to my lips, but I still didn't say them. I was silent for a long time and then nodded. Okay. I had a meal with her, for nearly an hour. We hardly said a word. In the end, she only repeated that sentence, "I really appreciate you." I was terminally ill and had an extremely poor appetite. However, I actually managed to eat a small half bowl of rice during that meal. When we left the restaurant, she gave me a set of clothes. She said to me, "I'm sorry, it's not a very good purchase. Please don't dislike it. You got your clothes wet that night at the beach." I wanted to say that my clothes were soaked through that night not because of fishing out the body, but in the end, I just took the clothes and thanked her. I went to the street to hail a taxi. When the taxi arrived, she suddenly called out to me from behind and said, "Miss Lucy, if there's a chance in the future, can I invite you to have a meal again?" Eating alone, it's rather lonely, perhaps. Because that person was gone, she felt lonely. And she didn't want to show her grief to the people she knew well. Perhaps, like me, she was used to being alone, or perhaps, she just said it casually because she was too grief-stricken. But at the moment I opened the taxi door, I stood stiffly on the street. After a long time, I turned back and said, "Okay." That night, I didn't go to the beach after all. Instead, I found a hotel and stayed there. At night, my body hurt terribly, so I randomly stuffed a handful of painkillers. Looking out of the window, I immediately had the urge to jump out, but at that moment, the voice of that person floated up in my mind again. "Can I invite you to have a meal again in the future?" Eating alone, it's rather lonely. In the end, that urge to jump off the building was forcefully suppressed. I started receiving her calls frequently. Sometimes we had a meal together. And sometimes we just sat together for a while. After Simon died, it seemed that no one had ever been willing to stay by my side, even if it was just to say one more word to me. And now, it seemed that there was someone in this world who was bearing the same grief as me and longing for someone to hug and warm each other, even if it was just having a meal in silence together or just absorbing a little bit of warmth. I muddled through another half a month, after learning that I didn't have a job. That female police officer even took the initiative to help me find a job. She said it was to be an assistant to a forensic doctor in the police force and deal with some things that I could do. The work wasn't troublesome, and the treatment was quite good. She said to me again, "I've also found a place for you to live. The rent is very cheap. Lucy, do you want to consider staying in H City and giving it a try? The people in the bureau are all very grateful to you. In the future, we can often have meals together." I suddenly remembered that night when I was preparing to face death and walk towards the deep sea. From a distance, I saw the bonfire that was lit and the crowd laughing and chatting around it. I still didn't give her an answer. After all, my illness had reached this stage, and death was no longer something that I could decide. One night in the early morning, I suddenly had a nosebleed and woke up from my dream. Looking at the bloodstains that had dyed the pillow red, I actually felt a sense of fear subconsciously. It seemed that I was starting to be afraid of death, and I no longer thought that it was just a way to be free. The piece of paper floated beside me and gently touched my face, like a silent comfort. I looked at it and said, "It's really strange. I suddenly seem to have a bit of a desire to live, but I should be dying soon." The piece of paper accompanied me silently. After a long time, words appeared on it. "Perhaps there will be a miracle for a patient with a terminal illness who has no cure." How could there be any miracle? I smiled and didn't say anything more. I didn't officially start working, but for a while, I couldn't make up my mind to seek death again. My body was sometimes good and sometimes bad. Occasionally, when I felt in a good state and had nothing to do, I would go and help that forensic doctor. One night, the forensic doctor had just finished dissecting the body and making the death identification. A group of people in the team invited each other to have a meal together. The forensic doctor poured me a glass of wine and said it was to toast my selfless dedication. He said that when I officially started working, he would definitely give me double the salary as compensation. I had never been toasted before, so I didn't take the glass immediately. He touched his nose and said, I carefully disinfected my hands. "Don't dislike it. In the past, it was always others who disliked me." I took the glass of wine and drank it all in one gulp. The spiciness went down my throat and then into my stomach. I suddenly felt that I seemed to be coming back to life again. A group of people had a lively meal and then dispersed noisily. That night, I sat on the bed and looked at the piece of paper and said, "Do you think I'm a very awkward person? One moment I want to die, and the next moment I want to live." It replied to me, "Lucy, do as you want." I felt that these words were very familiar. I suddenly remembered that recently I seemed to have seen Simon's piece of paper very rarely. The last time I saw it seemed to be nearly half a month ago. Moreover, these few times, over several months, it seemed that this was the only sentence he had replied to me with, and my consciousness also seemed to be gradually forgetting about him and the piece of paper. I thought it was a bit strange, but these thoughts in my mind were quickly erased. The piece of paper disappeared, and I lay down on the bed and quickly fell into a deep sleep. One night, I suddenly had a dream. I dreamt of that piggy bank. I held it and went to the beach to set it on fire, but the sea breeze blew over and extinguished the fire. There was a strange laugh in my ear. Except for hell banknotes and items for the dead, nothing in the human world can be burned and sent to the underworld. He lied to you, don't you know that? I was startled by that suddenly emerging voice. The piggy bank couldn't be lit, but it rolled to my feet. The jar suddenly opened, and the things inside spilled all over the ground. There were letters, with free and easy, beautiful handwriting. It wasn't the scrawled and ugly handwriting that I was used to seeing, but between the lines, it was still familiar. Along with the letters, a ring rolled out. The words on the letters uncontrollably entered my sight. Lucy asked me what my wish was. Can I tell her that I hope to be with her? Or, better not, I'm not good enough anyway. I got beaten up by my adoptive father, but I got the money and bought that nice ring. Can I give it to Lucy? Will she be angry? Lucy said my handwriting is really ugly. Actually, it's not that bad. I hope Lucy can be reunited with her family and live a peaceful and smooth life. If I can be with her, I'll dig out the piggy bank and give it to her. I wonder if she will like it. The words on those letters were like blades, desperately piercing into my mind. I woke up suddenly, covered in cold sweat. Then I recalled that dream. I found that everything in the dream, just like Simon and the piece of paper, blurred in my mind again. The next morning, when I was brushing my teeth, there was no more blood on my gums. I suddenly remembered that I hadn't had a nosebleed for some days either. On a whim, I went to the hospital. I suddenly wanted to ask how many days I could still live, a month, half a month, or just a few days. After looking at my diagnosis form, the doctor told me, your white blood cells are abnormally increasing, you need to pay attention to taking your medicine and recuperating. Up until now, I didn't really want to listen to those words of comfort or euphemisms, so I said directly, Doctor, how many days can I probably still live? The middle-aged director, who was typing on the keyboard to prescribe medicine, was stunned. Then he raised his eyes and looked at me strangely. Miss, you have symptoms of a cold. It's a bacterial infection that caused the increase in white blood cells. It's normal for people to get sick occasionally. How could it be as serious as you said? I explained, Doctor, I know my own condition. I'm in the late stage of leukemia. You don't need to hide it from me. I don't have any family either. Just tell me the truth. The doctor's expression became even more strange. It seemed that he suspected that there was something wrong with my mind. He showed me the form. It's just a temporary bacterial infection. There's no leukemia. I left the hospital. In the late autumn of H City, the sun was still high in the sky. I stood in the sunlight holding the diagnosis form and didn't move for a long time. Groups of trees cast large shadows. In that deserted, shaded place, I didn't know who had dropped a diagnosis form. The wind blew up the form and blew it in front of me, then it blew it into the air. Suddenly, I thought of a piece of paper and a person who had left. It was as if there was a hand in my mind. It forcefully erased those things that had just emerged. I tried hard to recall again and again. Then I stood under the blazing sun, not understanding why I had suddenly stood there. I went back to the rented place. After many days, I started to have a severe headache again. I went to the drawer to look for painkillers. I knocked over the medicine bottle, and the pills spilled all over the floor. Before I could pick up a single pill, I fell heavily to the ground and fell into a coma. In my confused consciousness, it seemed that my phone was ringing. It seemed that someone came in and was calling me urgently, Lucy, Lucy. I couldn't tell the difference between reality and a dream, nor could I tell whose voice it was. I had another dream. In the dream, I saw that piece of paper. I clearly remembered the piece of paper and Simon again. The window was wide open, and the night wind rushed in. The piece of paper was blown over, and for the first time, I saw the back of that piece of paper. Simon's transparent figure rushed up urgently, trying to stop the piece of paper, but I still clearly saw everything on it. They were some short diaries, one after another, slowly flipping through in front of my eyes. The handwriting was free and easy, beautiful. There was no scrawl, no ugliness. I peeked at the book of life and death of the god of death and actually saw that Lucy's death date was today. I went to reason with him, and he actually said he didn't write it wrong. I ran to the human world and saw Lucy sitting in the bathroom with her back against the wall. Her body was slowly becoming transparent, and the little minions of the god of death were dozing off beside her, waiting for her. I woke her up and said, Excuse me, I know I shouldn't do this, but I don't like the idea that her life ends so sloppily like this. I lied to Lucy, saying that I wanted to get back the piggy bank, and she believed me. She thought she could really burn it for me. She still doesn't want to live. I heard her inner voice say that she was going to jump into the sea. I want to save her, no matter what the cost. I saw the drug dealers arrogantly throw the body of that police officer on that beach. The sea was rising, gradually swallowing up the body. I led Lucy there. I lied to her, saying that she had scattered my ashes there before. I have no right to force her to live. She was tortured by the illness and had no one to love her, but I thought, could I let her choose again by herself, choose again, to live or to die? Lucy saved that body, I thought. Could the relatives and friends of that body also help me save her? She came back to life. I asked the god of death to cross out her serious illness in the book of life and death. The god of death said the deal should be fulfilled. A little minion escaped from the purgatory, and he was afraid of being punished. He needed to find a ghost to take his place. No ghost was willing to go. Entering the purgatory means never being reincarnated again, endless labor and never being free, so, the god of death agreed to my deal. The human world shouldn't know about the affairs of the underworld. She will soon forget me and the piece of paper. I thought about it. In the end, should I leave her some words? Lucy, do as you want. I was suffocating in the dream and desperately wanted to grab something. Then I watched that transparent figure sink into the purgatory and disappear. I screamed and called for help, but no one could see me. The sunlight stabbed into my eyes, and I woke up suddenly. Luna was sitting by my bed, holding a towel and wiping my forehead. When she saw me suddenly sit up, she was startled by me. I once accidentally fell while beachcombing at the beach and found the body of a police officer in the sea. That body was Luna's boyfriend. Luna got to know me because of this and became my friend. I sat on the bed, still feeling scared, and said, I had a nightmare. Luna asked me, what kind of dream? I thought carefully, but I couldn't remember anything. Probably people are like this. It's always difficult to recall the dreams they have had. I became a formal forensic assistant in the team, after work. Occasionally Luna and I would invite several colleagues from the team to go to a food stall and have some barbecue together. The days have been peaceful. On weekends, when I occasionally stayed at home and scrolled through my phone, I came across a few photos. One was a back view of a woman standing in the deep sea at dusk. For no reason, I felt a bit familiar, as if I had seen it before. The other one was taken on the same night. The police went to the beach and took away a body. It was probably a case of jumping into the sea. I sighed with some regret. The next night, when watching TV, I saw on the news that the police had captured a college student named Jenny. It was said that for a certain period of time, she was called Jenny. She was taken back by the Lincoln family and was the fake daughter who had been mistaken for the real one. Later, when the truth was revealed, she couldn't stand falling back into obscurity all of a sudden. Jenny, following a bunch of bad companions, was involved in sex trade and financial fraud. Her actions were of such a wicked nature that she was sentenced to life imprisonment. The news also reported that the real daughter of the Lincoln family died in the deep sea. Mrs. Liu was heartbroken and died of a heart attack. Mr. Lincoln and Lucas, the eldest son of the Lincoln family, also became crazy. They would only ask people they met if they had seen the children of the Lincoln family. The Liu group was on the verge of collapse. It was like a cheesy wealthy family novel. I watched for a while and then found it boring, so I turned off the TV. I got lost from home when I was very young. Fortunately, my classmates were friendly, and the orphanage took care of me. After graduating from university, I got a well-paying job. I don't know why, but I'm not interested in finding my family. When I was 28 years old, I married a police officer in the team and had a cute daughter. Life has always been peaceful and smooth. The winters in H City are always warm. One day, I went to someone's home to embalm a body. The deceased was a famous wealthy businessman in H City, but he was polite and kind. The middle-aged man personally welcomed me in and served me tea. His eyes were filled with grief, but he was still patient in explaining to me, the deceased is my wife. My son got lost when he was 7 years old and has never been found. My wife was depressed for decades, and finally, before he finished speaking, his eyes were already red, for no reason. I felt that his eyebrows and eyes looked a bit familiar. Thinking it was probably an illusion, I didn't say much. I prepared the body for burial. When I was leaving, the middle-aged man paid me double the reward. He also invited me to visit his son's bedroom. Although his son had been missing for more than 20 years, the bedroom was still neatly arranged as if new. One could see the love the couple once had for their son. On the desk, there was still a textbook for the second grade of primary school, well, preserved. It had still turned yellow. On the cover, there was a name written in neat and beautiful regular script, Simon. I looked at it and, for no reason, was lost in thought. The middle, aged man, with a sad and desolate expression, but also somewhat proudly, talked to me about his son. He used to be the most well-behaved and intelligent good boy. When I left the villa, the middle, aged man saw me out. He said to me earnestly and sincerely, "There is a black birthmark on the left side of his face, near the ear. If you see such a person, please, you must tell me. Thank you very much." I nodded and left. When I was leaving the front yard, suddenly my eyes went dark. In my mind, a voice suddenly emerged. It was a boy's voice, with a smile. Obviously, I had never heard it before, but it seemed that it should have been in my memory. "My adoptive father doesn't like it when I write well. He has his own biological son, and his biological son's handwriting is ugly. He can't stand me surpassing his son." Is my handwriting ugly? Actually, it wasn't ugly originally. That voice seemed to be right beside me. I looked sideways, but there was no one there. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew in the winter, when I was waiting for a car on the street. A little girl ran past me with a stack of drawing papers in her arms. Then she was tripped by something and fell, when I quickly turned to help her. A drawing paper blown by the wind landed on me. It was like a very light hug in silence. The little girl hurriedly thanked me. She picked up the drawing papers all over the ground and ran away. In my trance, like memory, I seemed to have also found a piece of paper. It seemed that it wasn't a drawing paper. It gently hugged me across the void. It said, "I hope Lucy can live a peaceful and smooth life." After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.